Okay, we're back and ready to wrap things up in this last session here. Let me bring my red line back up. And to get this. All right, here we go. We left off after item 10 on table A, and we now will look at item 11. And the first thing you're going to see up here on the screen is that there's a tremendous amount of red on item 11. And honestly, that reflects the fact that we all have problems with utilities. And really the biggest problem we have is that when someone checks this item off, they expect that they are going to get accurate, complete, and reliable underground information from us. And of course, we all know that ain't happening. We can only do what we can do when it comes to trying to correlate information we see on the ground with plans and with utility locate markings, unless they excavate, right? So this has been an ongoing problem, and the committee recognizes we had a tremendous number of suggestions related to table A item 11, everything from way on one side to the way on the other. We had some people who wanted to digress back to what item 11 said in 2011. If you remember, in 2011, we had the choices, and one of them was to, just do the observed evidence. And a lot of clients, a lot of lenders wanted that. Well, in 2016, we made observed evidence of utilities on the property mandatory. That is in section 5E Romanesque 4 in the standards, and it remains that way today. We talked about that, I think, in the previous sessions. Some people wanted to go back to that because what's happening is a lot of clients or lenders were saying, well, I want table A item 11, but I only want observed evidence. So I want you to modify item 11 to only do the observed evidence. Well, that's a ridiculously stupid request, because observed evidence is already required under the 2016 standards. But you have lenders, and I mentioned earlier how I talked to an attorney one time who said, I don't want to have to read the standards. I just know if you do these things that I'll have what I want. And this is kind of the epitome of that. They are hung up on observed evidence as related to table A item 11. And to be quite honest, if I was faced with that and they absolutely insisted on doing that, I probably would tell them, okay, fine, I'll do that. It's going to be an extra $500, even though I'm not going to do anything because we already had to locate those. But I joke sometimes and say stupid requests cost money, right? Anyway, we had a variety of suggestions on what to do with table A item 11. One of the other problems, and almost every surveyor is intimately familiar with this, and this is the case almost in every state, so we're not alone, and that is that requests for 811 locates from surveyors are routinely ignored or receive kind of a lukewarm reception. So that's a problem, and the committee did not see that getting any better. So we had a lengthy discussion about table A item 11, probably the longest discussion we had in the committee meetings up to that point, actually through the entire process. So you can see a lot of changes, and what I'm going to do is the easiest way to look and see what we did is to go to the clean version. But first I want to show you what it used to say. What it said in 2016 was location of utilities existing on or serving the surveyed property as determined by, and then we had 3 bullet points: observed evidence collected pursuant to section 5E4. We thought that would make it clear that that was already information that was collected. The second bullet was plans requested by the surveyor and obtained from utility companies. And the third was markings requested by the surveyor pursuant to an 811 locate request. All right. That was what it said in 2016. Now, what I want to do is go to the clean version here, and we will look and see how this ended up. So let's share again. So here's item 11 now, and you can see it's pretty short, right? We reinstituted choices. There are now 2 choices. So you can read this, but it's as item 11 now says, evidence of underground utilities existing on or serving the surveyed property, in addition to the observed evidence of utilities required pursuant to 5E4, right? So we're trying to put right up front there, this is already required. We're already giving you this information. As determined by, and I have 2 choices, A and B. A, plans and or reports provided by the client, right? or the client's representative with reference to the sources of information. Or B, markings coordinated by the surveyor pursuant to a private utility locate request. Now, a couple things you'll note here. Number one, A or B, neither of them says anything about an 811 locate, right? It's generally a waste of time. Now, remember what I said when we first talked about table A, though, everything's negotiable. So you may have a client who says, you know what, all I want is an 811 locate request. Okay, fine, we can do that. You could either modify item 11 to do that, or you could do that as a table A item 20, an extra. Either way that you want to do it, you could do that. But our experience is, and I think most surveyors would agree, it's kind of a waste of time to do that. So it's not a choice on here. The other things you notice is that A says, it used to say plans obtained by the surveyor. Now it says plans or reports provided to the surveyor. Again, if you have access to plans, if the client, you know, you're talking with the client about this sort of thing, and you say, hey, I can get plans, right? Well, you can negotiate that change. Under B, coordinated by the surveyor. If someone someone checks that item off, then that's going to cause you to have a discussion with them about how this is going to be handled. Obviously, unlike an 811 locate, a private utility locate costs something, and depending on the property, it may cost quite a bit. And by the way, another reason we got away from the 811 locate request is because there's obviously a resistance to doing things on private property unless you are literally excavating. So getting the utilities located on an apartment complex by 811 probably just not going to happen, right? So if they check off 11B, you're going to need to have a conversation. You know, I can coordinate this, but how are we going to do this? There is a cost associated with that. And we know what hourly rates are, and we can probably come up with some ballpark on how much it would take, or we make a call and request that. But those are now the choices on 11. We've got A and B. The note that's down there, I think this is a very, very important note with regard to managing those expectations that we talked about, right? The expectations that people think they are going to get this accurate and complete information. I take that note and literally cut it out of here and put it in my scope of work. Right? When I believe they are going to be requesting utility information, or for that matter, even if they don't request utility information, it's probably good information on there to manage people's expectations, right? We made a couple very minor changes to that note, but the way it's written right now, you could literally clip it out and stick it in your scope of work. And I would, by the way, also put it right on the face of the survey. It's about as far as we can go to manage expectations, which really translate to controlling our liability right? Preventing liability. So that's what we did with Table A, Item 11. We had one member of the committee who is also a surveyor, but he's a title person, and he was adamant about needing to change this. He was quite satisfied with the changes that we made. Do I think this will end up working? I don't know. We will see. I just have a feeling that in 2026, we're going to be looking at this again, trying to figure out how we can improve on it. But that's what we've done with Table A, Item 11. So let me stop this share and go back to our red line version. And we'll share again. All right, so that takes care of Table A, Item 11. And incidentally, you can see in what we used to have in Item 11 was representative examples of the utilities, and included a bunch of things. But remember, we now, starting in 2016, have to show all evidence of utilities as a mandatory part of the standards in Section 5E Romanesque 4. So these representative examples are now have been moved out of Table A, Item 11, up into Section 5E, which is where you'll find them now. So we weren't just simply eliminating any examples. They've actually been moved to the appropriate location in the standards. All right, that brings us to Table A, Item 12. The problem that some people have had with Table A, Item 12 is that clients would say, oh, they would check it off. I talked to one surveyor in particular. He said the client checked it off, and he said, so what requirements, you checked it off. What requirements do you want me to survey to? And the response was, you should know. That's helpful, right? So what we felt was appropriate here, and to control this sort of thing, and that's not the only person I heard that kind of story from, was that the relevant survey requirements are to be provided. We actually probably should have said must be provided by the client. But that's a minor change, but it's an important one to get surveyors out from under, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but people who are ignorant using Table A and just checking things off and not really understanding what they're checking. Item 13, there was no change here. This is where we include the owner's names on the adjoiners. And what we did in 2016 was we tried to be very specific. So you don't have to do deed research. You don't have to run a chain of title. It's the owners according to the current tax records. And if there is more than one owner, then you put the first name down and say et al., which is Roman and used in legal world for and others. Item 14, no change there either. This one really probably should invoke or should cause a conversation with the client. But we know these kind of conversations don't go anywhere because they check these off and they really don't know why or what they're asking for. Is the distance of concern to the nearest, the intersecting right-of-way line or to the center line? And do they want to know that it's 713.47 feet, or can we go on Google and say, well, it's about 700 feet? I think it would probably help the surveyor to have some idea of what this might have to do with. It might have to do with being able to get a driveway permit. On a state highway, if you're within a certain distance of an intersecting street, you may not be able to get a driveway permit. Or does it have, what does it have to do with? Right? And that may help answer those questions, because most likely, if you ask the client, they're not going to know. And as a result, if they don't know and you're not sure, just be specific what you show on the survey. So show the distance maybe from the nearest boundary line or boundary corner over, and say plus or minus 700 feet to the center line of 25th Street, something to that effect. Then you've reported factual information. You haven't misrepresented it. You said plus or minus. Maybe you even would say it was scaled or something to that effect. All right, item 15, very minor change here. Obviously, we only struck one word and changed the shall to a must. This is the item that maybe the surveyor would actually initiate use of this item, but this is the option to do some parts or actually much of section 5 uh, not on the ground surveying, right? Maybe, as it says, rectified orthophoto or mapping, remote sensing, airborne laser scanning. Drones are a perfect application for this sort of thing. For showing the location of certain features, excluding boundaries, where ground measurements are not otherwise necessary to locate those features to an appropriate and acceptable accuracy relative to a nearby boundary. Okay, so if there is a concern about a building location relative to a setback and it's pretty close, the setback's 40 and the building looks like it's around 40, you better do a field measurement, right? And obviously the boundary has to be done on the ground. This is a boundary survey, right? But there are other things that if everyone agrees, and this is the qualification here, the surveyor must, A, discuss the ramifications of such methodologies. For example, the potential precision and completeness of the data gathered with the insurer, the lender, and the client prior to performing the survey. So if you were to use, for example, rectified orthophoto, you're going to see the roof line, not the face of the building, as an example. Another example is that there are going to be shadows next to buildings, and they may obscure some things that you might otherwise have located or someone might be concerned about. The other thing is that the precisions, generally, unless you're flying a drone, in which case you can get you know, well, not just a drone, but a drone would be the best example of the ability to get very, very precise, high resolution, good precision. If it's just normal rectified orthophotos or, the state of Indiana has mapping that's available for free. It's really good stuff, but is it going to be as precise as field located? No, it's not. So we need to have that discussion. And we might say, for example, you're going to see the roof line, not the face of building. Is that okay? There's going to be shadows. They're going to obscure perhaps some utility features that I otherwise would need to locate. The precisions are going to be plus or minus, whatever, 2 feet, not a couple tenths like we might otherwise. Is that okay with everyone? And if it is, then great. You can save some time and money by doing this. Uh, you want to get that in writing. And then the second qualification is B, place a note on the face of the survey explaining the source, the date, the precision, and other relevant qualifications of the data. So this would be following up with the conversation about, well, what's the precision? And there may be things obscured and the roof lines, not the face of building, that sort of thing. Now, if you had a building in close proximity, maybe you could show it using, for example, the orthophotography, but you would want to field locate it so that you could show the appropriate setback, as an example. Another thing is if they check off table A item 7A, which is the exterior dimensions of each building at ground level, you're not going to get that, right? And so you would have to resolve that conflict, which is they want you to do item 15, but they also want the measurements around the buildings. So item 15 is an opportunity for a surveyor to perhaps sell some other services to lower the cost to the client, to get things done more quickly, but it is at a very definitive cost from the standpoint of completeness and accuracy, precision of the survey. So I hopefully that covers 15. Items 16 and 17 are both legacy items from HUD. I think HUD met with us in the late 90s. I'm thinking probably around 1998. We actually were contacted by them, and we sat down, and there was an initiative in the government at that time to use industry standards for government type of work, if there was an industry standard. And they had done some work, and they found that there were these ALTA NSPS standards, or ALTA CSM at the time. And they had studied them, and they said, we have an order to use stuff like this, but we need a few extra things, right? We can't just subscribe to them without some things. And there were 3 things that they needed. One of them was what is item 16, evidence of recent earth moving work, building construction, or building additions. We have made a few tweaks to these in the intervening years. I've never been able to connect back with HUD. We could not find the people to talk to. At one point, I was told there probably weren't any people to talk to. In any event, we added the observed in the process of conducting the field work, which is the common theme throughout the standards. Sometimes people ask, well, what does recent mean? Well, recent means whatever you want it to mean, right? We can't define it. If we had to define it, we wouldn't say recent. We'd say evidence of earth moving work done in the last 6 months, right? So recent is a subjective term. My advice to surveyors is, if you think it's quote unquote recent, then comment on it. And this might be an example where you would have your table A notes on your survey, and under item 16, you might say, it appears that there's been a building addition on the east side in recent years, or something to that effect, right? Item 17, as I said, was also a HUD item. This is proposed changes in street right-of-way lines, if such information is made available to the surveyor by the controlling jurisdiction. In a larger city, they probably have some sort of thoroughfare plan that I know City of Indianapolis does. I can go online, I can look at it. If I was doing a survey on 71st Street, West 71st Street, I could probably look it up, and it's going to say, well, the plan is that's going to be 140 feet wide and a 4-lane road. That's all the information they give. They don't, you don't know where the right-of-way line, you don't know how they're going to widen it, on which side, but at least then I could have a note that says, according to the thoroughfare plan of the City of Indianapolis found on this link, which I would put right on the survey, West 71st Street is planned to be a 4-lane road, 140-foot right-of-way, right? If the information is not available, or if you're in a small town, you might just call the street department, say, hey, you got any plans here? There are certainly places where you can look and say, yeah, there's nothing ever going to happen here. It's in a residential area, but it would be good to make the call. And then what you would report is who you talked to on what date and what they told you. Evidence of recent street or sidewalk construction or repairs. Again, there's that word recent, but this may have to do, in Indiana, we have something called Barrett Law, where the jurisdiction can, upon petition, they can put streets and even sewers in, and then assess over a 7-year period all of the affected properties. That might be something that they were thinking of here, I'm not sure. Now, the third, I said there were 3 HUD items. The third one was the one we took out last time, which was evidence of site use as a solid waste dump, sump, or sanitary landfill. We struck that in 2016 because when that got put in the late 90s, it was not necessarily routine that people were doing phase 1 environmental reports on properties. Nowadays, when there is a lender involved, I don't think that property changes hands without a phase 1 environmental or an update to a phase 1 environmental, which has a specific term, I believe. And evidence of site use as a dump or sanitary landfill, that obviously falls in the realm of what they would be doing on a phase 1. So we struck that in 2016. That bumped up the wetlands item, which in 2011 had been item 19. It bumped it up to item 18. This wetlands has been a problem ever since we put it in 2011. Which I will point out, we had a couple of suggestions on that, and the committee back in 2011 working on those standards said, you know, that seems like a pretty good idea, seems like a logical thing, so we put it in there. It's been a fiasco ever since. People would check this off thinking that the surveyor was somehow miraculously going to turn into a wetlands biologist and tell them if there were wetlands on the property. In 2016, we tried to mitigate that and, you know, control those expectations so that it said what's crossed out here. If there has been a field delineation of wetlands, you know, then check this off and we'll locate those points. It still was a problem. And so this was on our list of suggestions. What are we going to do with this item? And ALTA's suggestion in the end was, let's just strike it. Let's just get rid of it. It has nothing to do with title. If someone is concerned about wetlands, they can negotiate it under the fill in the blank table A item. Or if your company offers wetlands delineations, wetlands expertise, then you could negotiate that to include it under table A item 20 also. But we just struck it, and again, the theme on that sort of thing, and this isn't the only place this has happened, was that the committees are no longer going to decide to stick something in table A because it sounds like a good idea. Right? It's just, that's a bad reason to put things in table A. We're probably not going to see new table A items until either the title industry or the lending institutions, in particular the large banks, are clamoring for this new item. Until that point, you're probably not going to see new items. So 18 has been crossed out. So what had been 19 is now 18. And that was the offsite easements item. And you can see we made some changes to that this time. Again, that one's been a problem because it's not, it wasn't clear to a lot of people what that meant. And so we have tried to reword it again. I'm happy with the wording, but I'm not sure that it gets it across. What I would really like to say on item 18 is what we're trying to do, which is we're going to treat the offsite easements as if they are a fee parcel. And so we will conduct our land title survey on those easements just like we would conduct it on a fee parcel, doing everything that's in section 5, doing the drawing like section 6, including whatever the optional table A items that were selected. We're going to include those, except item 1, because if you remember, when this item first came in, we had two choices. One was to basically survey the offsite easements, and the other was to monument them. And we decided in 2011, I think, or maybe it was in 2016, that monumenting offsite easements, putting monuments on other people's property probably was not the best idea we ever had. So that monumentation option was removed, but we had to say that here. So you can see what it says, but pursuant to sections 5 and 6, meaning we're going to survey everything pursuant to sections 5 and 6 and the table A items, except item 1, which is monumentation. Include as a part of the survey any plottable off-site easements or servitudes disclosed in documents provided to or obtained by the surveyor. Normally, these will be the offsite easements in the title commitment. These would be pertinent easements, typically insured. These will be the easements that are listed in Schedule A, right? They're not burdening the property, they're benefiting the property. So you'll have in Schedule A, parcel 1, the fee parcel, and parcel 2, the 50-foot wide access easement that provides access to 22nd Street off the backside of the property. In that case, if they check this off, I am going to survey that 50-foot wide easement just like it's a part of the fee parcel. Right? That's the intent of this item. Now, a cautionary note, and that is if you are surveying a restaurant out in front of a mall and they check this item off, you're going to need to have a conversation, because it is not unlikely that there are cross parking and access easements across the entire mall to the benefit of that restaurant. So your fee just went from $8,500 to $85,000, and I doubt that that's what they had in mind when they checked that item off. So, so you need to look for that sort of thing. The other cautionary note is that if they check this off and you do not have the title commitment, you know, they're needing a proposal and you don't have a title commitment yet, you need to put a qualifier in your proposal, because you don't know, there may or may not be 1, 2, or 5 offsite easements. And if you don't have a qualifier in there, you've given them a proposal to do the survey, and all of a sudden you get the title commitment and it's got 3 offsite easements. So it's going to cause you to spend more time and money than what you were expecting. That gets us to the last table A item, which is item 20. And no change here. This is the professional liability, the requirement that a client can put on there to assure that the surveyor has professional liability insurance. And this has actually been a fairly popular item. This got put in probably in 2011, maybe, because what we found and what we realized, there was a huge disconnect between what our clients thought and what was a fact. Clients and attorneys thought that 100% of surveyors carried professional liability insurance, and they were kind of shocked to find out that was not the case. And so the committees decided the appropriate thing to do was put an item on there that said we in fact want our surveyor to have professional liability insurance. So we eliminated 18. I said we eliminated 2 items. That was 10B, the plumbness of the walls, and 18. Well, 10B was still fell in item 10, but 18 was an item. And so now we only have 19 items, with number 20 being the fill in the blank item. And 19 now being professional liability insurance, and 18 now being the offsite easements. That is that. Here's our dates. ALTA adopted these on October 1st. NSPS adopted them on October 30th. And again, they go into effect on February 23rd. Now, what I would like to do now is I'm going to stop this share, and I want to go to the frequently asked questions, so we can talk about those. Now, what happened on this, and I can't remember, I may have mentioned this earlier, but in the process of going through the list of suggestions, which I say ended up being about 14 pages long, there were a number of suggestions that that the committee rejected, a lot of them, on the basis that they were either practice issues, contract issues, business decisions that really did not belong in the standards. But there were a lot of issues raised that even the committee said, you know, that's a good point. But really that's a contract issue. But maybe we ought to say something about that, right? And what we decided to do was create a set of frequently asked questions, and I made a note on all the suggestions, and there were a number of them, the ones that we're going to look at here. We said we ought to create an FAQ related to this issue, right? And so that's the genesis of these FAQs for 2021. Now, there are also FAQs on the NSPS website, which I will show you here in a bit, on the 2016 standards, some of which are no longer applicable, but some of them which are. So prior to February 23rd, I will be going in and merging those 2 documents. I'll take the FAQs from 2016 that are still applicable, and I'll merge them with these FAQs we're going to look at here, and we'll have one comprehensive set of frequently asked questions that you'll be able to find on the NSPS website. And I'll show you where that stuff is here in just a little bit. One of the very first things that we need to talk about is the transition. Right? What happens during this transition period? You're starting a survey in January and you're not finishing it till March. Right? Well, what do we do with respect to the 2021 standards? Well, the fact is that these standards are not effective until February 23rd. So in theory, if you are under contract prior to February 23rd, you would be under contract under the 2016 standards. If you morph over past February 23rd until the ending, my suggestion is logically you just complete your contract, right, under the 2016 standards. On the other hand, maybe you're starting your survey in the middle of February and you're not going to get done till after February 23rd. Maybe you want a contract to do the 2021 standards. I think a lot of how you deal with that is going to depend on the client, more likely the client's attorney or the lender's attorney, who may not be familiar that the standards are going to be changing, or they may be familiar and they know the effective date. So you may have to do some legwork there to figure out how you're going to deal with that transition. I don't think it's critical that if you remember in section 3A, we said that as of February 23rd, all previous versions are superseded. That's an easy thing to say. And I think that the main point on that is if you are starting a survey on February 23rd or after, it has to be to the 2021 standards. You can't start a survey on March 1st and decide to use the 2016 standards. That's the main point there. I think there are some cautionary notes related to this. Maybe you do the survey, it's finished, you deliver it on February 20th, and 2 months later they call you and say, hey, we never closed, but we're getting ready to close and we need this thing updated. The lender wants to make sure it's current conditions. What are you going to do then, right? Do you have to shift over to the 2021 standards? In my book, I think the question is, did they actually close or not? You need to find out, because sometimes they'll tell you they didn't close, but they actually did. And the evidence of that is when they're wanting you to change the names of the parties. It's like, hey, we didn't close, we're getting ready to close, but it's not the ABC Corporation, it's the PDQ Corporation, and it's Fidelity Title, not First American Title. I'm saying they've already bought the property and they're flipping it to someone else, and it's a new survey, right? You could even go online and see if the ownership changed in the meantime, right? And then you could figure that out. I think if they never closed, then in my mind, I think it would not be wrong to go ahead and do that. And I think most of you know I hate the term update, but go ahead and do that update to bring it up to current conditions, because they actually never closed, and it's just an extension of that survey that was under contract in January under the 2016 standards anyway. But if they're trying to pull a fast one, and in fact, this is actually a new transaction, then it needs to be 2021. Everybody's just going to have to play that one by ear a little bit. If you wonder why I don't like the term update, it's because there's no such thing. When you sign a survey, a land title survey, even a quote unquote update, you are saying that these are the current conditions on the property. So in a sense, an update is a new survey. It's a new survey every time you do it. The only difference is you happen to have done that survey before. Now, when I do an update, I'll use that term with you all. I don't use it with clients or anybody else. If I do an update, our survey looks like a brand new survey, right? The title block has changed. Any revisions that happened prior to the update are removed. The certification block, the signature, it's not like we just, sign it again or change the date. It looks like a brand new survey. The only thing on our survey in Indiana, we have to write a surveyor's report if you read the surveyor's report, it will say that this survey is based in part on this earlier survey. That's the only evidence at all that it's a quote unquote update. Now, clients like to call it an update because the expectation is it will be faster and cost less. I would say not cost less, hardly cost anything, because when they order an update, they also say nothing's changed, as if they knew the things that we need to locate. So there is an expectation, and depending on the situation, it might cost less and you might be able to get it done quicker. right? But it depends. I mean, not long ago, I had somebody call me to update a survey. I'm not joking, from 1987. Right? I don't care how you look at that. That's not an update, and I wouldn't call it that anyway. But there is a trend to try and foist liability and basically falsehoods on surveyors as to what's going on. All right, providing professional guidance. I mentioned that we removed the uh, the wetlands item. Right. Well, there's some concern there. Just as there would be concern with other things, we may do the survey and be looking and seeing a bunch of cattails and like, I know I'm no wetlands expert, but I can look at an area that's wet and has cattails in it and say, yeah, that's probably a wetlands. And they might want to, I might want to advise a client. So as a surveyor, you might want to have a normal comment in your contract or in your communications with the client that says, we would suggest that you consult, whatever, a wetlands, floodplain, if there appear to be flooding issues that's not something you can deal with, or environmental issues, whatever it might be. Maybe we just have a standard communication that says, hey, it's our suggestion, you might want to consider this. On section 4, on the research, we cover this in section 4, but it was worth mentioning a little bit more that, our obligation, that they are to provide us certain research information. And if they don't, my responsibility is to perform my research pursuant to the state requirements. But if a state has no standards, like California, mandatory standards like California and Minnesota and Pennsylvania, actually New York doesn't either, although they're hoping to get them. It is advised that the surveyor be familiar with what the normal standard of care is in those situations, right? Because that's probably what you're going to be held to. Section 5B2, there was a suggestion related to situations now that happen fairly frequently, especially in developed areas, where they put some sort of walking or bicycle path that may be adjoining along the side of a road. Right? Well, what does, how does that impact what I do on the land title survey? Maybe there's a grass strip between the two of them. And if you remember in 5B2, the requirement is to locate the edge of the traveled way. Right? And there's a reason that we pick that wording. But how does that relate to, for example, the edge of a walking path? It probably depends, well, it will depend on statutes and common law in a state. But I think if you look at 5B4, it talks about forms of access, people crossing the property onto the property. So we need to show that information. We don't need to make judgments about hardly anything on a land title survey. We just need to show the uses that are going on. So I think that probably takes care of that. On the utility locate markings, I mentioned we had a long discussion about table A item 11. And when we decided to include utility locate markings as evidence of utilities and as evidence of an easement, right? Because the reason we require all utility features be shown is because at any utility feature might be evidence of an easement. Right? So those two issues are kind of joined at the hip. There was concern about showing paint marks or flags because we don't know where they came from, right? And so that's why the requirement was to indicate the source of those markings if we know, and if we don't know, then we say we don't know where they came from. And I came up with, this is not intended to be a suggestion really, it's just a thought. I said, maybe some sort of note that says something like this, right? Paint markings found on the ground and shown hereon as evidence of possible or probable underground utilities are consistent with typical utility locate, utility markings. However, no utility report was provided to authenticate these markings. Their source is unknown. The user of this plat or map should rely on such markings at their own risk. Some sort of note like that. Again, what are we doing? Trying to manage expectations. The record description, just a comment here. 99.5% of the time on a retracement survey, it's a land title survey, the description in Schedule A is going to be the same as the current deed description, right? But sometimes that 0.5%, it may not be. I've had that happen more than once. And where those descriptions are not the same, and I'm not talking about transposed numbers or punctuation, just some little minor change, or maybe even a typo. I'm talking about a different description of what ostensibly is the same property, but it's not the same description as what's in the record. What we suggest is, you ought to call a title company and say, so, what's up? I did the research, I've got the deed, but what you are proposing to insure is not the same description. Can you help me with that? And if they say, yeah, as happened to me one time, they said, yeah, I don't know, we found it in our records. I'm guessing at some point in the past, someone had written a new description for that parcel that didn't get put into the deed, into the conveyance at that time, but the title company had the new description. And so when it came time for the new survey, they're like, I don't know, we have this description, let's go ahead and use it. So I said, is that what you're going to insure? And they said, yes. Well, in that case, I think it's appropriate to have both descriptions on there. I mean, the client and the lender are going to want to see the Schedule A description because that's what's being insured. The standards, on the other hand, also require that the record description be on there. And then if for some reason I decided to write my own new description, which we talked about, and if I do that, I need to make a note about that and why I did it. If I did that, I might have 3 descriptions on the face of the survey. Is that confusing? No, that's not confusing. We're very specific with the header. Here's a description from Schedule A. Here's a record description. Here's the new description that I wrote for a specific purpose. 6B6, the water boundaries. Forever, we've had a requirement in the standards that there needs to be a caveat. If we have a water boundary on the property, we write a caveat that talks about the nature of water boundaries. But there's never been an example of that. And so I said to myself, let me just write something that it's easier for somebody to put something out there, for example, for you all to give consideration to and tweak into your own wording than it is for you to try and come up with something yourself. So I wrote this: where the property being surveyed includes a water boundary, the parties relying on the survey should be aware that 1, laws regarding the delineation of ownership of the bed of navigable waters and the upland owner differ from state to state. Right? It's different in Wisconsin than it is in Illinois. It's different in Michigan than it is in Indiana. Number 2, water boundaries are typically subject to change due to natural causes, right? Specifically reliction, accretion, and erosion. Number 3, and as a result, the boundary shown here on may or may not represent the actual location of the limit of title. And then one sentence, then the blank, whatever it was we located, right? The bank, the edge of water, high water, shown here on was located on a specific date. So that's an example of that type of thing. 6B7, contiguity gaps and overlaps. Just some comments here about notes related to that. I think it's probably good to comment about the relationship with every adjoiner. I know sometimes, if there's no gap or overlap, we may just not want to comment about it. What do I have to say? There's no overlap, but it might not be a bad idea to say that, there's a 6-foot overlap with the south adjoiner. However, the east, west, and north adjoiners are contiguous with the surveyed property, something to that effect. We talked about off-site easements. It looks like I need to fix that. That's morphed over into here. And we talked about the treatment of the off-site easements and how we deal with those if they check off that item in Table A, but on Section 6C Romanesque 1, we're talking about the treatment of the easements, not surveying them, but how we show them, right? And the comment here is that typically you have either an easement that burdens the property, which is listed in Schedule B2, or an easement that benefits the property, which is an insured appurtenant easement that's listed in Schedule A as one of the insured parcels. It is, however, possible that you could have an easement that both benefits and burdens the property, right? And we don't have time because we're just about out of time here. I don't want to go into that, but that's possible. The other thing I want to point out is that in this day and age, it's not unusual that the title company puts what should be a beneficial easement in Schedule B2, or they put well, usually they don't put an insured easement that shouldn't have been, but it's not unusual to find an easement in the title commitment that should be an insured easement benefiting the property, and they put it in Schedule B2 as a burdening easement. So just pay attention to that thing. The title commitment, we need to recognize that title commitments are revised. Keep that in mind. One important point here too is that we always want to identify the title commitment, right? So it's First American Title Insurance Company commitment number 12345, effective date January 13, 2021, and then it gets revised. And what's the effective date on a revision? It's still the same. The only difference is somewhere on that you'll see REV1 or REV2. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to make sure that you note it's First American, this title and this commitment number, effective date this, but it's revision 1, 2, 3, or whatever. And that way, there's no questions as to what document you were relying on. We talked about if the easements are not listed in the title commitment, but we came across them, we have to contact the title company, and if they can't show that it's been released or otherwise terminated, we need to show it. I put a note here that might be that sort of thing there. It's not listed in title commitment, however, no evidence of release, vacation, or abandonment has been provided. The title company has been advised. Certification, I've got a couple more things, but I'm going to end with this. ATIMA, you may see this on a title commitment now. ATIMA or ISAOA, right? It sounds like some acronym for a company or something. It's not. It's as their interests may appear, or its successors and or assigns. Now, I have a couple more FAQs here that I'll just point you to, but I'm going to end with this. I get a lot of calls from people who want to know, should I certify to successors and assigns, or as their interests may appear? Let me address as their interests may appear first. That's actually a good thing to have in a certification, because that's narrowing down what certification does. It's to these people and they only have a 25% interest or whatever, right? So as their interest may appear is good. It's successors and or assigns. Number one, title companies do not need successors and assigns. We specifically asked ALTA. Their comment was, I have no idea why I would ever need that in a certification. So there wouldn't be any harm in doing it, but it's not necessary. The buyer, the owner, there's no way I'm going to certify to the successors and assigns of the owner. I'm not doing that. They can't pay me enough money, right? The people who need successors and assigns are the lenders. And we've run out of time, so I'm not going to go into it, but basically successors and assigns of the lender is not really a problem, right? I'm no attorney, but I don't believe that it increases your liability because let's say the commercial loan is for 7 years and Chase Bank has it for 5 years, and then they sell the loan to Wells Fargo for 2 more years, right? Well, Chase Bank is out of it. You're no longer liable to them because they're not involved in the mortgage. You're now liable, if you do successors and assigns, you're liable to Wells Fargo. but not for any longer than you would have been liable to Chase in the first place, right? When they sell the loan, it doesn't increase the length of time. It still was 7 years. And so Wells Fargo has it only for 2 more years. So the fact is you're still only liable to one bank for 7 years. It's just that the bank, the bank changed from Chase to Wells Fargo. And mortgages get sold all the time. Sometimes they're sold 2 days after you close the loan. So successors and assigns is appropriate for the lender, and I don't see a problem with doing that. All right. As I say, there are some other FAQs here. I would point you to those, and you can look through those at your leisure. I hope this has been helpful for you. I know we're probably a couple minutes over now, but my contact information, it's not there yet. Let me get it up here. Again, I am always more than happy to, let me figure out how to do this here. I'm always more than happy to take questions. I'm having so much trouble with this. Here we go. Happy to take questions from anyone, comments, suggestions. I already have almost a full page of suggestions for 2026. It's best for me probably if you use the Gmail account that's up here. That's my Schneider phone. I am still part-time at Schneider, but email works best, and I would use the LS800 email if you can. Contact me with questions, with comments, with suggestions. I'll be happy to respond to you. Really appreciate the opportunity to present all this information to you, and I hope it's been helpful. I will look forward to seeing some of you at least tomorrow, and I should be live immediately after this program to answer questions. Thank you very much.